I want to get into pari passu lending. Not every SBA lender does pari passu, and I always tell people these deals do
Yeah,
not happen every day. They
sure.
are big deals, and I know that people are really curious about them. So, can you just start with an overview of what is pari passu financing in SBA?
Yeah, so pari passu financing is basically tacking on using the SBA 7A to its maximum, which is 5 million, and then attaching some conventional financing portion. So it could be, another 1 million, 2 million, $3 million. And the pari passu basically just means that both of those loans have equal kind of lien position on the deal. Now, pari passu is one way. Sometimes the bank might say we'll do a SBA 7A loan in first lien position and we'll do a conventional second loan at second lien position. At the end of the day, it's really the same thing. It's going to be more what the bank wants to see and how they want to kind of manage their risk on that deal. But yeah, we're one of the few lenders in the country that do pari passu. We do want to become like the premier lender for that. What's really interesting in that deal size space is that in the business acquisition world, you have the private equity space, which is typically deals like 10, 11, 12, $13 million and up, right? People hear those deals all the time. And then you have the SBA small business space, which is typically anything from, $30,000 to $5 million. But there's a huge gap there that really doesn't get a lot of access to funding and typically has to be done by private money. And we want to become like a premier lender in that space, right? We want to be one of the go-to lenders in pari passu financing. But it's not an easy space, in those type of deals. Obviously, equity injection requirements sometimes may be higher. Experience is really going to be honed on. I mean, just as a reference, a lot of the buyers that I have in those deals right now, highly educated, highly successful in their careers, have assets on their PFS, right? It isn't somebody just saying, "Hey, I won the lottery, I got $1 million, I want to buy an $8 million business." It doesn't work that way, right? So these individuals who are buying these business, they're the cream of the crop when it comes to entrepreneurship and people who are able to buy these businesses. But yes, Northwest Bank's goal is again to become the top lender in that space and really turn these deals around as quickly as possible.
So you touched on this a little bit. Tell me more. How do you view a deal at the pari passu level differently than maybe a typical 7A deal as far as what would be reasonable to expect for a cash injection? Are you looking at a
Sure.
different DSCR requirement? Anything else you're evaluating differently?
Yeah. So one of the cool things I'll show your viewers, just kind of how we spread a deal, and in this deal specifically, it's pari passu. But with most banks, the debt service coverage ratio that they like to see in the interim year and the recent tax year is like a 1.4 debt service coverage ratio for acquisitions. So even if the business is $1 million, they want to see that the business is making $1.40, in cash for every dollar of debt. That's a really healthy business. Just to compare, if it was a traditional loan, most banks like to see a 1.25 debt service coverage for like working capital, buying equipment, things of that nature. So there's a 15 basis point difference there, and that's a lot of money, especially when you're scaling a business to 7, 8, 9, $20 million, right? That's a lot of EBITDA. That's a lot of revenue generating, a lot of cash. So the bar is high for those businesses. With pari passu financings, we like to see at least a 1.5 in the interim period, in the recent tax year, and at least a 1.25 in the prior year, which in this case would be 2022. Now, in the defense of the deals I've seen, most of the business make that easy. Their EBITDAs are 3, 4, $5 million. So there's really no problem making that. So typically when I underwrite these deals, that's not really an issue. It's going to cash flow. What we're really going to focus on is, okay, how much money is coming into the deal, who their investors are, because typically there's always investors in these deals, right? Most people don't have $2, $3 million laying around in cash, and specifically who the buyers are. Then we go into really the nitty gritty of the business itself. You know, an example is if I was doing a manufacturing firm, what's the relationship with their vendors? What are their payables? What are their receivables? What kind of contracts do they have? What do they look like? How long are contracts in place, right? Whereas if it's $1 million business, we may not get into all that. But with a large business like that, we're going to get into that. And the buyer has to be prepared to answer those questions, and the seller has to be prepared to give that information up. Now, normally, those businesses are listed by pretty advanced brokers, so they do a great job of packaging those deals up, having that information. But I can tell you from experience, because I've been blessed to work on a couple of deals right now that I have going. Those credit memos that we have to write as lenders, they can be 15, 20 pages long. I mean, they go deep, right? So I would say for the buyer and the brokers that may hear this, it's really important if you have a deal like that, get as much information as possible in the beginning. It just makes everybody's life easier, and those deals can move a lot quicker. But there is a lot of due diligence in those deals.
Do you have any other questions about SBA loans or the business acquisition process in general? Make sure to leave me your questions in the comments and I'll answer them in future content. And if you're enjoying these videos, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Check out the links in my show notes below to see how you can get in touch with me to talk about business acquisition financing.